The first thing they drilled into us when we landed in Alaska was silence. Not military silence, that we already knew, but the silence of the landscape itself. The snow absorbed everything. Even the roar of the C-130 that dropped us off seemed swallowed whole, vanishing into the white like it never existed. That's why the noise shook me so badly. It was my third night at Fort Jericho, an old radar installation left behind from the Cold War, buried halfway into the tundra. Half of it was underground, all steel corridors and humming generators, and the other half was wind-battered towers that looked like frozen skeletons against the gray sky. The men joked about ghosts. I didn't laugh. At 0300 hours, the sound started. Low, metallic, like the groan of a ship's hull deep under the sea. It came from beneath the ice. A tremor carried through the concrete floor, rattling the cot under me. I sat up, pulse hammering in my ears, and for a long moment I thought it was my imagination. But then I saw the others stirring, wide-eyed in the dim red emergency lights that bathed the barracks. "You hear that?" Corporal Ramirez whispered. Nobody answered. The groan faded, replaced by a long, dragging sound, like something massive shifting just below the surface of the earth. I could feel it in my teeth. My first thought was seismic activity, but we weren't anywhere near fault lines. My second thought, I didn't want to say out loud. By the time the alarm klaxon blared, half of us were already on our feet, boots pounding against metal grates as we rushed into the main corridor. Lieutenant Harker met us there, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp. He wasn't the type to rattle easily, but even he looked pale. "Generator malfunction," he barked. "Stay calm. I want fire teams to sweep sub-level 3. Move." I knew better. That sound wasn't machinery. I'd spent years around engines and turbines, and this was organic almost. A voice too large for the human throat. We descended the grated stairwells, rifles slung tight. The deeper we went, the colder it got. Frost rimmed the bulkheads, even though the heating system roared above us. The hum of the base seemed muffled, like the walls were holding their breath. Then we found the breach. Sub-level 3 was supposed to be sealed, storage only. But one of the bulkhead doors had buckled inward, steel twisted like it had been struck by something far heavier than any equipment we had down there. Beyond it lay darkness, a tunnel bored straight through the permafrost. "Jesus Christ," Ramirez muttered. "That ain't no cave-in." The walls of the tunnel glistened with ice, carved smooth, as if something had melted and refrozen them. A cold draft breathed from the opening, sharp as knives, carrying with it a smell that didn't belong in the frozen north. Damp, earthy, almost fungal. We raised our rifles. No one wanted to step forward, but orders were orders. As we moved in, the sound came again. This time it wasn't distant. It was inside the tunnel, reverberating off the ice walls. A groan that rose into a shriek before cutting off, leaving a silence so deep it made my bones ache. And then, footsteps, not ours, slow, heavy, coming toward us out of the dark. The footsteps echoed against the ice like a metronome, deliberate and heavy. Every man in our fire team froze in place, rifles shouldered, eyes straining into the dark. The tunnel seemed endless, the frost along its walls shimmering faintly in the glow of our helmet lamps. "Identify yourself," Lieutenant Harker's voice rang out, sharp but edged with something I had never heard from him before. Uncertainty. No reply, just that steady rhythm, closer now. Crunch, pause, crunch. My throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. Training screamed at me to steady my breathing, but instinct, the primal animal part, wanted me to run. Something about the cadence didn't sound human. Each step landed too heavy, too wet, as if whatever was coming dragged more than just its own weight. Then the sound stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every soldier's breath fogged the air, ghostly plumes drifting into the cold. I could hear Ramirez mutter a prayer in Spanish, low and urgent. "Advance," Harker ordered finally, though his voice had lost its sharp edge. We pushed forward, one cautious step at a time. The tunnel narrowed, the walls closing in until the ice brushed our shoulders. My lamp beam wavered over the frost, and for a moment I swore I saw shapes beneath it, like bones pressed just under the surface, half frozen, half embedded. Human shapes. Ramirez must have seen them too. "Lieutenant, you seeing this?" "Eyes front," Harker snapped, though his own light lingered a moment too long on the wall before jerking away. We moved another 10 meters before the tunnel opened into a chamber. I couldn't even call it natural. The walls curved smoothly, ribbed almost like the inside of some massive creature's lung. The air was colder here, carrying that same fungal, rotting scent that turned my stomach. And in the center of the chamber, the ice was broken. A jagged pit yawned onward into blackness. The edges steamed faintly, though the air around us was well below freezing. "Report this in," Harker muttered, signaling Corporal Jenkins with the radio. Jenkins fumbled with the handset, static crackling as he tried to raise command. But before he could get a word through, the sound came again. Not the groan this time. Something else. A whisper. Dozens of voices, layered on top of one another, seeping out of the pit. They spoke no language I knew, but the cadence was unmistakable. Chanting. Jenkins dropped the radio like it had burned him. "What the hell is that?" The whispering grew louder, rising into a chorus that rattled the chamber. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end, and suddenly I felt like a trespasser. Like we weren't supposed to be here, not in this place. "Fall back," Harker ordered. "Now! Move!" We turned as one, eager to leave, when the ice beneath Ramirez cracked like glass. He screamed as the floor gave way, his body vanishing into the black pit with terrifying speed. "Ramirez!" I lunged forward, but Harker yanked me back. The hole sealed almost instantly, frost racing across the jagged edges like the earth itself was erasing him. The chamber fell silent again. No chanting, no movement, just the frozen, seamless floor where my friend had been a second before. Nobody spoke as we retreated up the tunnel. Nobody had to. We all knew the truth. We hadn't found a tunnel. Something had dug its way up. When we climbed back into the base, our boots tracking frost across the steel grates, nobody spoke. Ramirez was gone. 1 second alive, the next swallowed whole. My mind kept replaying his scream, the raw terror in it, before silence devoured everything. Lieutenant Harker slammed the bulkhead shut behind us, spinning the wheel with white-knuckled force. He barked an order to Jenkins to weld it sealed. The corporal didn't hesitate. Sparks flew as the torch cut across the steel, the hiss and crackle echoing like gunfire in the corridor. We stood there in the dim light, each man's face pale, eyes darting to one another like we were searching for answers we knew we wouldn't get. Finally, Sergeant Collins broke the silence. "Lieutenant, what the hell did we just see?" Harker's jaw worked like he was chewing broken glass. "You didn't see anything. This is classified until command says otherwise." "With respect, sir," I said before I could stop myself. "Ramirez just got—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of the ice sealing itself over was too fresh, too unreal. Harker's eyes cut to me, hard as bayonets. "What happened down there stays in this room. You speak about it again without permission, I'll have you in the brig. Understood?" Nobody answered, but we all knew there was no way to bury this. Ramirez's absence alone would raise questions. That night, the base felt different. The silence wasn't just heavy, it was watchful. Every creak of the pipes, every thrum of the generators carried a new weight. I lay in my bunk, staring at the low ceiling, the red emergency lights painting shadows across the barracks. I wasn't the only one awake. Men shifted restlessly, muttering under their breath. A few prayed. Then came the second sound. It wasn't the groan this time, nor the whispering. It was softer, crueler, like fingernails dragging slowly across glass. The noia slithered through the ventilation shafts, circling above us. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. "Jesus Christ," Jenkins whispered. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound was inside, like it wasn't just in the air. It was vibrating through my skull. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. By morning, Ramirez's bunk was stripped bare. His personal effects, letters, photos, even his boots, were gone. None of us touched them. They had just vanished. "Maybe Supply moved his gear," Collins muttered, but his voice carried no conviction. I checked the log myself. Ramirez's name wasn't just missing from the bunk assignment, it was gone from the entire personnel list, as if he had never been stationed at Fort Jericho. I brought it to Harker. His face drained of color when I shoved the clipboard at him, but he said nothing. just stared a long moment before muttering, "Dismissed." Dismissed. Like a man disappearing into the earth meant nothing. But I knew the truth. Something down there had taken Ramirez, and whatever it wasn't finished. By the third day after Ramirez vanished, the base was unraveling. It wasn't just that one of our own was gone, it was the way his existence was being erased. His name had vanished from the duty roster, the armory sign-out sheets, even the payroll logs. Men swore they'd shared meals with him just last week, played cards in the mess, but now his face was fading from photographs pinned to the corkboard. I kept one picture, though, a group shot we'd taken outside the comms tower, all of us lined up in the snow with stupid grins. In the photo, Ramirez stood right beside me, his arms slung over my shoulder. Except now, when I looked, there was only a gap, an empty space, like the photo had always been missing a man. I shoved it deep into my locker. If it disappeared too, I didn't want to watch. Lieutenant Harker doubled the patrols. He claimed it was due to unconfirmed seismic activity beneath the permafrost. Nobody bought it. Even Collins, the most by-the-book soldier I knew, muttered about ghosts when he thought no one was listening. That night in the mess hall, conversation was hushed, eyes darting constantly to the corners of the room. The base felt smaller somehow, the steel walls pressing inward like a cage. "You ever hear of Operation Coldwell?" Jenkins asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. We looked at him. He leaned closer. "My brother served out here back in the 80s, said they were digging tunnels under the radar stations, looking for something. He never told me what, but when he rotated home, he wouldn't sleep underground again. Slept in his damn truck for years." "Bullshit," Collins muttered, but his voice wavered. "No," Jenkins insisted. "What if what we found wasn't new? What if it's been here the whole time?" The idea rooted in me like frostbite spreading through a limb. Later that night, I crept down to the comms room, the opera. Tor on duty had nodded off, headphones sliding off his head. I slid behind the console and started pulling logs. Transmissions in, transmissions out. At first, it was the usual clutter. Encrypted traffic, weather updates, supply requests. But then I saw it. A file marked classified, eyes only, time-stamped the night Ramirez disappeared. The content was just one line of text. Containment breach confirmed, entity active. I copied it down in my notebook, heart pounding, then shoved everything back where I'd found it. As I turned to leave, I caught a flicker on the monitor. The external cameras, mounted outside the base perimeter, were cycling through their feeds. Snow, dark sky, towers half buried in ice, nothing unusual. Then one of the feeds froze. At first I thought it was static, but no, there was a shape in the snow, tall, wrong, like a man stretched too far, limbs elongated, standing motionless just beyond the floodlights. Its head tilted slowly toward the camera. The screen blinked black. When it came back, the feed was normal again. I stood there in the humming dark of the comms room, my breath fogging the glass, and knew with absolute certainty whatever had taken Ramirez was already watching us. Sleep became impossible after the comms room incident. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stretched figure in the snow, head cocked like it had been listening. By morning, I wasn't sure if it had been real or some trick of fatigue, but the weight in my gut told me it was no hallucination. At breakfast, the tension in the mess hall was thick enough to choke on. Men stared into their trays of powdered eggs without touching them. Jenkins scratched furiously at the back of his hand, muttering about things under the ice. Collins told him to shut the hell up, but his own spoon trembled so hard he spilled coffee across the table. Lieutenant Harker entered late, face carved from stone, his voice even sharper than usual. "New orders. No one goes near sub-level 3. All patrols will remain topside unless cleared by me personally. You see anything, you report it. Understood?" A chorus of tired, half-hearted, "Yes, sir," echoed back. The first patrol went out that afternoon. 4 men in white camo gear trudged across the endless snowfields, rifles slung across their backs. I watched from the tower, the wind biting through my gloves as I leaned against the railing. At first, they were just shapes moving steadily into the distance. Then one of them stopped. Just stopped, mid-stride, as if frozen in place. The others circled back, their movements sharp and agitated. Through the binoculars, I could see their mouths moving, but no sound reached me. Then, one by one, they all turned their heads toward the same point, off to the right. There was nothing there, just empty white. Suddenly, all four dropped their rifles into the snow. "Jesus," I whispered. They stood there, perfectly still, faces tilted upward as though listening to something in the air. A second later, they began walking, not back toward the base, not along their assigned route, but straight into the open tundra. I grabbed the field phone, calling down to Harker in the command post. "Lieutenant, Patrol 1's gone off course. They're heading north, no comms, no weapons." Static hissed back at me. "Harker, do you copy?" The line went dead. By the time I looked back through the binoculars, the four men were already distant specks, moving with steady, deliberate strides. None of them turned back. None of them hesitated. Within minutes, they vanished into the whiteout. An emergency recall was sounded, but no response came. Hours later, the second patrol found only their rifles half buried in snowdrifts. No footprints remained. It was as if the storm itself had erased them. That night, the whispers returned. I heard them as I lay in my bunk, thin, sibilant voices threading through the ventilation shafts. Not English, not any language I knew. They rose and fell in strange cadences, almost like a lullaby. One of the men across the room bolted upright, eyes wide and glassy. "They're calling me," he whispered. His voice was flat, emotionless. "They're so close now." Collins grabbed him by the shoulders, shaking him hard, but the man only repeated the phrase like a needle skipping on a record. "They're so close now. So close now." And in that moment, I realized something terrible. The whispers weren't outside. They were inside us. The night after the patrol vanished, the base became a coffin. The wind outside howled through the antennae and struts, a sound like teeth grinding together. But inside it was worse. Dead silence, punctuated only by boots scuffing on steel or the nervous tap of fingers against rifle stocks. I volunteered for tower duty just to keep busy. Anything was better than lying in the barracks listening to whispers crawl through the ducts. The observation tower rose 30 feet above the frozen ground, its narrow stairwell rattling with every gust of wind. From the top, the world stretched endless and white, the horizon blurred by falling snow. The floodlights carved shallow pools of yellow against the darkness, but beyond that, nothing. Only the vast, blank tundra. I paced the graded platform, rubbing my hands together for warmth, binoculars slung around my neck. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust felt like a breath against my ear. Around 300 hours, I saw him. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the storm, a shape in the snow that shifted when I blinked. But then the figure stepped into the light. Tall, wrong, limbs too long, posture slightly hunched, its head tilted the same way I'd seen on the comms feed. It stood just beyond the outer floodlight, right where the glow turned to shadow. I raised the binoculars with shaking hands. Through the glass, I saw details I wish I could forget. Its skin wasn't skin at all, but something pale and stretched, like wax pulled too thin. Where its face should have been, there was only smooth flesh. No eyes, no mouth. And yet, I knew it was staring at me. My breath fogged the lenses. I lowered the binoculars, heart hammering. The figure hadn't moved. It simply stood there, head cocked, as if waiting. I grabbed the field radio. "Command, this is Tower 2. I've got movement on the perimeter. Repeat, unknown contact outside that, see wire." Static, then Harker's clipped voice. "Hold position. Do not engage." "Sir, it's just standing there." "Do not engage, soldier. That's an order." I lowered the radio, bile rising in my throat. Hold position? While that thing stared me down from 20 yards away. My hands itched to squeeze the trigger, but something deeper, something primal, told me not to. Shooting it would be like striking a hornet's nest. Minutes bled into hours. The figure never moved, never faltered. The storm raged around it, but its outline remained sharp, unwavering. By dawn, it was gone. Just empty snow. I stumbled back into the barracks, face numb, hands trembling so badly I couldn't unclip my gear. Collins caught my arm. "You saw it, didn't you?" His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "They're getting closer," he whispered. "Every night. Closer." I collapsed onto my bunk, sleep finally dragging me under like a rip current. But even in dreams, I wasn't safe. I saw the faceless man standing in the snow, head cocked, waiting, and I woke with frost on my sheets. By the time morning rolled around, the entire base was buzzing with unease. Everyone had seen something, shadows moving against the snow, figures half glimpsed at the edge of the floodlights, whispers that weren't carried by the wind. We stopped talking about it out loud, but the fear sat heavy in every room, thick as the frost that crept along the bulkheads. Lieutenant Harker called an assembly in the hangar bay. His voice echoed off the corrugated steel walls, clipped and hard. Effective immediately, all outside patrols are suspended. All non-essential personnel will remain within fortified zones. Sub-level 3 remains sealed under my direct authority. A ripple of mutters moved through the men. Collins raised his hand. Sir, with respect, what are we dealing with out there? Harker's jaw tightened. That's above your clearance, Sergeant. That answer didn't satisfy anyone. Murmurs rose louder until Harker slammed his fist against a crate. You will follow orders. That's how we survive out here. Dismissed. We filed out in silence. Later that day, I found myself in the command office under the pretense of delivering a report. Harker was gone, but the safe behind his desk sat open a crack. Inside were folders stamped with the same red eyes only I'd seen in the comms room. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't resist. The first file was dated 1962. It described geological surveys beneath Fort Jericho during the Cold War. Words leapt out at me. Anomalous cavity, biological samples, containment protocols. The language was dry, clinical, but the implication was clear. They hadn't just built a radar station out here. They'd been keeping something buried. I flipped to the next folder, more recent. Ramirez's name appeared once, scribbled in pencil, then struck through so violently the paper tore. Below it, subject compromised. Entity assimilation probable, assimilatio. I shoved the files back just as Harker's boots echoed in the corridor. I barely had time to close the safe and slip out before he entered. My pulse thundered in my ears the whole way back to the barracks. That night, the whispers came again, stronger than ever. They weren't vague murmurs anymore. They were clear, distinct, pressing against my skull from the inside. Open the doors. Let us in. I clutched my blanket, praying it was only me, but across the room Jenkins sat upright, eyes unfocused, lips moving in sync with the voices. He wasn't repeating them, he was translating. They're hungry, he whispered. They want us to come down. Collins crossed the room in 2 strides and slapped him hard across the face. Snap out of it! Jenkins blinked, dazed, then clutched his head, moaning like something inside was splitting him open. Before we could calm him, the klaxon blared. Emergency alarm. Red lights strobed along the ceiling, washing the barracks in bloody light. Harker's voice came over the intercom. All personnel to defensive positions. We have a breach on the perimeter. I grabbed my rifle with trembling hands. Deep down, I already knew. The faceless man wasn't just watching anymore. It was inside the wire. The alarm tore through the base like a serrated blade, rattling steel walls and pounding inside my skull. I bolted upright, rifle in hand, heart already hammering. Around me, men scrambled into their gear, boots slamming against the grated floor. We poured into the main corridor, red lights flashing overhead. The sound of the klaxon mingled with the thunder of boots and shouted orders. Harker appeared at the front, his face ashen but controlled. Perimeter breach at Sector C, defensive line on me, move. We rushed topside through the blast doors, the cold slamming into us like a wall of knives. Snow whipped across the open yard, floodlights casting long, twitching shadows. My lungs burned as the freezing air seared them raw. Then I saw the fence. It wasn't torn or bent, it was open. The chain link had been peeled apart, links fused into strange curves as though melted by fire. Steam curled upward from the ground, though the temperature was 40 below. Positions! Harker barked. We spread along the line of sandbag emplacements, rifles leveled toward the breach. For a long, breathless moment, there was only the wind and the faint groan of stressed metal. Then movement. Shapes emerged from the storm, at first just shadows, then clearer, closer. They weren't faceless men this time. They were ours. The missing patrol. 4 soldiers in white camo walked toward the base, heads bowed, rifles still gone. Relief surged through the line. Jenkins beside me sobbed out, "It's them! They're alive!" But something was wrong. Their gait was too even, too synchronized. Snow clung to their uniforms in sheets, yet they didn't shiver, didn't stumble, and as they stepped under the floodlights, my blood turned to ice. Their faces were smooth, blank, just like the thing I'd seen in the tower.
"Fire!"
Harker roared. The night exploded in gunfire, muzzle flashes tearing against the storm. Bullets ripped through the four figures, jerking their bodies back, but no blood sprayed, no screams. They just kept coming, arms outstretched like puppets pulled forward by invisible strings. I squeezed the trigger until my magazine clicked empty. Still they advanced. Holes tore through their chests, but beneath the shredded fabric, I glimpsed something pale and wet, writhing like muscle without skin. Collins hurled a grenade. The explosion shook the yard, snow billowing skyward. When the smoke cleared, the four figures were gone. Gone, except for the prince. Dozens of them, radiating outward from the blast site as if the soldiers had split into many. The prince trailed in every direction, vanishing into the dark. The klaxon died suddenly, leaving only the hiss of the storm and the ringing in my ears. Men panted, rifles trembling in their hands. Harker's voice cut through the silence. "Back inside, now." We retreated into the base, sealing the blast doors behind us. My heart still raced as I wiped frost from my lashes. Jenkins leaned close, whispering so softly I almost missed it. "Those weren't ours. They're wearing us." I stared at him, but I couldn't argue, because deep down, I already believed it. The blast doors groaned shut, sealing with a hollow clang that echoed through the base. For a moment, none of us moved. We just stood in the dim corridor, steam rising from our gear, listening to the silence pressing in around us. Then Harker barked the order. "Barracks lockdown. Nobody leaves until cleared." We shuffled back, rifles still warm, hearts still thundering. I couldn't stop thinking about what Jenkins had whispered outside. "They're wearing us." The words coiled in my mind like a snake I couldn't shake off. Inside, the atmosphere collapsed into chaos. Men muttered in corners, their voices frantic and low. Collins tried to calm them, shouting over the din, but the fear was spreading faster than his words. "They looked like us," one soldier shouted. "That was Thompson's face, I swear it." "They didn't have faces," another argued, trembling. "That wasn't human." I sat on my bunk, staring at my rifle. The smell of cordite still clung to the metal. Across from me, Jenkins was scratching at his neck, hard enough to leave raw lines across his skin. "They're inside already," he whispered. "Inside the walls. Inside us." Collins grabbed him by the wrist. "Enough! You're spooking the whole damn platoon." But Jenkins only smiled, a thin, cracked expression. "You'll see, when they start speaking with our voices." That night, the base felt different, colder. The heating system hummed, but frost crept thick along the pipes. In the silence, I swore I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate, stopping just outside our door. At 0200 hours, the intercom crackled. Harker's voice filled the barracks. "Attention. Fort Jericho is now under quarantine. No communication in or out without command authorization. Remain in assigned quarters unless ordered otherwise. This is not a drill." The line clicked dead. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Quarantine. It wasn't just about keeping us safe. It was about keeping something else contained. I couldn't sleep. Around 0400, I slipped out of my bunk and crept down the hall. The command office door was cracked open, faint light spilling across the floor. Inside, Harker sat hunched over the desk, speaking into a secure handset. His face was drawn, sweat gleaming on his brow despite the cold. "No, sir, it's not under control. We've already lost 5 men. No, they weren't killed. They were taken, assimilated. Yes, I understand, but containment's a joke. We're sitting on a damn powder keg." I froze, heart pounding. Assimilated. That word again. Harker must have sensed movement because his head snapped up. Our eyes locked. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he slammed the handset down and barked, "You didn't hear a damn thing, soldier. Back to your quarters. That's an order." I saluted, throat tight, and turned away. As I hurried back, the lights flickered overhead, just for a second, long enough to plunge the hall into darkness, long enough for me to hear it. A whisper right behind me. Closer now. By morning, the barracks smelled like sweat and fear. Nobody had slept. Eyes were red-rimmed, hands shook when they tried to light cigarettes or pour coffee. Every clang of a pipe, every flicker of the lights made us jump. Jenkins was the worst. He hadn't stopped scratching since the night before. His neck and wrists were raw, streaked with blood. Collins tried to take him to the infirmary, but Jenkins fought like a cornered animal, snarling through clenched teeth. "They'll cut me open," he hissed. "They'll see it crawling under my skin." His words sent a shiver down the room. I looked closer. His veins did seem darker, twisting beneath his flesh like black threads. Collins restrained him with a chokehold, dragging him down the hall. The rest of us followed, a grim procession. The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and rusted steel. Dr. Evans, the base medic, frowned as we forced Jenkins onto a gurney. "What's wrong with him?" Collins demanded. Evans peeled back Jenkins's collar, eyes narrowing. "He's feverish, dehydrated, could be frostbite infection." "It's not frostbite!" Jenkins screamed, thrashing. His eyes rolled white, foam flecking his lips. "They're inside me!" Evans tried to inject him with a sedative, but Jenkins bucked, knocking the syringe from his hand. The needle clattered to the floor. Jenkins grabbed Evans by the collar, pulling him close. "You hear them, don't you, Doc? They're calling your name, too." Evans went pale. For a heartbeat, I thought Jenkins might kill him. Then Collins slammed the butt of his rifle into Jenkins's ribs. He collapsed, wheezing, long enough for Evans to jab the needle into his arm. Within seconds, Jenkins went limp, his breathing shallow but steady. "Keep him restrained," Evans muttered, strapping leather cuffs across his wrists and ankles. "Whatever this is, it's not psychological. Something's wrong with his blood." He drew a sample into a vial. When he held it to the light, I felt my stomach drop. The blood wasn't red. It shimmered dark, oily black, threads of silver writhing within it like worms. "What the hell?" Collins whispered. Evans sealed the vial, his hand shaking. "This doesn't leave the infirmary. Not a word to anyone." But the secret didn't stay hidden. By evening, word spread anyway. Men whispered about parasites, about infection, about Jenkins being patient zero. Some swore they could feel something crawling beneath their own skin. That night, the whispers returned louder than ever. I lay in my bunk, fists pressed to my ears, but they pushed through the bone, filling my skull. "Join us. The cold is not the end. The cold is the beginning." Across the room, Jenkins began to hum, soft at first, then louder, a low, guttural melody that didn't sound like any human tune. The leather straps creaked as his body arched against them. Then, clear as day, his voice joined the whispers, hundreds of voices spilling from his throat at once. Men screamed. Collins shoved his fist into Jenkins's mouth to silence him, but the sound kept pouring out, muffled but relentless. And that's when the lights went out. The lights snapped off with a crack that echoed down the halls, plunging the base into absolute darkness. The hum of the generators went silent, and for a heartbeat the world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Men shouted in the barracks, boots slamming against steel as they fumbled for flashlights. Somewhere down the hall, a rifle went off, the shot deafening in the confined space. The emergency klaxon tried to sputter to life, but only a strangled wheeze came through the speakers before dying completely. I clutched my rifle, my other hand fumbling for the flashlight clipped to my belt. When the beam finally cut through the dark, I wished it hadn't. Jenkins was gone. The gurney lay overturned, leather straps ripped like paper. Blood smeared the walls in long, frantic streaks. The humming that had been building in his throat moments before was gone, replaced by silence far heavier than the blackout itself. Collins swore and raised his light. "How the hell did he—" A sound interrupted him. Not the whispers this time, something heavier, wet. A dragging noise moving just beyond the edge of the flashlight's glow. We followed it into the corridor, beams of light jittering against the walls. The air was colder here, our breath fogging in thick plumes. Then we saw the trail. Black fluid smeared across the floor, glistening like oil, streaked with silvery threads that writhed faintly as our light touched them. The trail slithered down toward sublevel 3. The place Harker had sworn was sealed. Collins muttered, "Jesus Christ." It wanted to get down there. We barely made it 10 steps before Harker's voice cut through the dark. He'd appeared out of nowhere, flashlight steady, pistol in hand. "Back to your quarters. Now." His tone was iron. "Sir," Collins snapped, "you saw the trail. Jenkins isn't human anymore. He's heading below." That level is restricted, Harker barked. I'll handle it. But something in his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of fear, quickly smothered. He wasn't in control, not anymore. The men hesitated. No one wanted to disobey a direct order, but no one trusted him either. The silence stretched too long. Then the sound came again. That dragging. Closer this time. Every light swung toward the stairwell. The beam caught motion just for an instant, something long, too long, folding itself around the corner with insect-like grace, a smear of pale flesh, a glimpse of a face or many faces rippling beneath translucent skin. Half the men opened fire. Bullets tore into the dark, muzzle flashes strobing the hall. Screams followed, whether ours or theirs I couldn't tell. The thing retreated, vanishing into the black. The trail of fluid pulsed faintly, as though alive. When the gunfire stopped, the silence was unbearable. Then, faintly, through the steel of the floor beneath our boots, came a sound I'll never forget. Knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from sub-level 3. Harker's face drained of color. Get back. Now. That's an order. But none of us moved, because the knocking hadn't stopped. It was spreading, echoing up through the walls, the vents, the very bones of the base, and it was answering the whispers. The knocking didn't fade, it multiplied. Every wall seemed to thrum with it, every vent a hollow drum. The sound sank into my chest like a second heartbeat, slow and steady, inescapable. Harker finally snapped. Gear up, we're sweeping sub-level 3. The men froze. Nobody wanted to hear it, let alone obey. Sub-level 3 had always been forbidden, a rumor wrapped in steel doors. The only thing we knew for certain was that it had been sealed since long before any of us were stationed here. Collins spat on the floor. About damn time you told us what's down there. Harker didn't answer. His jaw flexed, his eyes hard. Lock and load. So we did. Magazines slammed into rifles, flashlights clicked on, beams trembling in our hands. We moved as one, down the central stairwell, deeper than I'd ever gone. The air grew colder, sharper, biting into my lungs. By the time we reached the final landing, frost had crept thick across the handrails, glittering like glass. The steel blast doors loomed before us, massive and scarred. Someone, or something, had been working at them. The locking bolts were bent, metal warped outward. The knocking was louder here, reverberating through the steel until my teeth rattled. Harker produced a ring of keys from his belt. With deliberate care, he unlocked the mechanism. The sound of grinding gears filled the stairwell as the door cracked open. A gust of air rolled out, wet, rotten, and ancient. We stepped inside. The corridor stretched ahead, narrower than expected, the walls lined with pipes that dripped black condensation. My boots squelched against the floor. The light revealed streaks of dark fluid smeared across the concrete, forming symbols I couldn't recognize. Circles within circles, jagged spirals. Christ, Collins muttered. This isn't a storage level. He was right. The further we descended, the more the architecture changed. Teal gave way to rough stone, as though the base had been built on top of a cavern. The air was humid, heavy, alive with faint whispers that slithered just beyond hearing. We reached a chamber, wide, round. The walls glistened with frost and something else, pale growths, pulsing faintly like veins beneath skin. In the center stood Jenkins, or what was left of him. He was on his knees, arms spread wide. His skin was translucent, stretched thin, his veins glowing faint silver, his head tilted back at an impossible angle. From his chest, something writhed outward, a tendril of flesh anchored into the floor, pulsing with every beat of his heart. Welcome, Jenkins whispered, though his mouth didn't move. The sound came from everywhere at once, echoing through the chamber. We've been waiting. Half the squad raised rifles. Harker shouted, "Hold your fire!" But it was too late. One of the younger privates panicked. He screamed and squeezed the trigger. The chamber exploded in gunfire, bullets tearing into Jenkins's body. His chest burst, fluid sprang across the stone. The tendrils didn't die, they multiplied. The walls erupted, splitting open like rotten fruit, and pale limbs slithered free. We had woken something that was never meant to be touched, and the base itself seemed to breathe around us. The walls tore open with a sound like wet fabric ripping apart. Tendrils burst forth, slick, pale cords that writhed with purpose, lashing toward us. The chamber's floor heaved under our boots as though the stone itself were alive. "Fire! Fire, damn it!" Harker roared. Rifles thundered, muzzle flashes strobing the cavern in frantic bursts of light. Bullets tore chunks from the writhing mass, spraying black and silver ichor across the walls. The smell hit me instantly, coppery, metallic, with a sweet rot that clawed at the back of my throat. Jenkins, if it could still be called Jenkins, wasn't screaming. His face, stretched thin and translucent, wore a placid expression, as though he were merely watching from somewhere far away. The tendril anchored in his chest pulsed brighter, feeding the monstrosity crawling from the stone. A soldier beside me, Dunbar, wasn't fast enough. One of the tendrils whipped around his leg and yanked him off his feet. He screamed, rifle clattering as he was dragged toward the wall. Collins lunged, grabbing Dunbar's arms, but the flesh coil tightened, snapping bone like a twig. The scream cut short. In an instant, Dunbar was gone, swallowed into the pulsing wall as though he'd never existed. We fell back, firing wildly. The air rang with overlapping shouts and the deafening bark of rifles. My flashlight beam cut across the cavern, catching movement overhead. Something was crawling on the ceiling. It was huge, bigger than a man, its body a shifting mass of limbs and faces, half-formed and melting back into the flesh. Eyes blinked open across its surface, rolling wildly, locking on us all at once. "Grenade!" Collins bellowed. I ripped one from my vest, thumbed the pin, and hurled it high. It detonated against the ceiling in a blossom of fire and stone. Chunks of flesh rained down, sizzling against the cavern floor. The creature shrieked, not with a single voice, but with many, layered and discordant, a choir of agony that made my eardrums feel like they'd split. Harker grabbed my shoulder, dragging me toward the exit. "Fall back to the stairwell! Move!" We ran, boots slipping in black slime. Behind us, tendrils slammed against the floor like whips, shattering stone, gouging trenches. The cavern itself seemed to convulse, walls squeezing inward as if to swallow us whole. At the stairwell, I turned back one last time. Jenkins's body was unraveling, skin peeling away in ribbons that fused with the writhing mass around him. His eyes, dozens of them now, locked onto mine. "You can't leave," the whisper filled my skull. "You've already joined us." I stumbled backward, almost missing the first step. Collins shoved me up the stairs, and we fled, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Behind us, the chamber roared like a beast awakening, the sound echoing up the stairwell. When the blast doors finally clanged shut above us, I collapsed against the wall, gasping. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my rifle. We'd seen it, touched it, wounded it, but it wasn't dead, and now it knew exactly where we were. The blast doors sealed behind us with a bone-rattling clang, but the sound gave no comfort. The walls trembled as though the thing below pressed its weight against them. Dust rained from the ceiling, sprinkling across our helmets and rifles. Collins bent over, gasping, sweat freezing on his face. "We can't hold this. That thing, it's inside the base already." No one argued. We'd all seen the way Jenkins's body unraveled, how his flesh merged with the walls. Closing the door hadn't trapped it. It had simply cut off one of its limbs. Harker straightened, pistol still in hand, jaw tight. We regroup, fortify the barracks. Nobody moves alone. But the base itself groaned in protest. A pipe burst somewhere down the hall, spraying blackened water. The lights flickered once, twice, before steadying into a sickly, dim glow. I could feel it then. Not just fear, presence. Something watching from the vents, the walls, the floor beneath our boots. The base had become its hunting ground. We moved quickly, weapons up, nerves stretched razor thin. Every sound was a trigger. A clatter of metal echoed down the corridor, and 3 rifles fired before anyone realized it was just a fallen wrench. When we reached the barracks, the door was ajar. Harker froze. "I locked this." We entered slowly. My flashlight cut across bunks that had been tossed aside, mattresses ripped open as though clawed. The air was heavy, damp with a sweet, rotting odor. Then we saw them. 2 soldiers, or what remained of them. Their uniforms hung in tatters, bodies slumped against the far wall. But their faces, God, their faces. Smooth, blank expanses of flesh where features should have been. Collins gagged, turning away. "It's picking us off." "No," I whispered, throat dry. "It's collecting us." As if on cue, the whispers started again. This time, not in our heads, but aloud. The 2 blank-faced corpses, penned their mouths in unison. No lips moved, yet the words poured out layered and wrong. Come closer. Join. You belong." The sound froze me. My rifle trembled in my hands. One of the younger privates broke, screaming as he emptied his magazine into the bodies. Flesh tore, spraying black ichor, but the voices didn't stop. They only grew louder, echoing through the barracks until my skull rang with it. "Fall back!" Harker barked. We spilled into the corridor again, slamming the door shut. My chest heaved, lungs burning as though I'd been running for miles. Behind the door, the whispers didn't fade. They followed, and then came the footsteps. Heavy, many, stomping in perfect rhythm, closing in from every direction at once. The metallic ring of boots on steel floors reverberated through the base. But they weren't our boots. Not anymore. We backed toward the command center, rifles up. My ears strained, trying to separate real sound from the endless whispers. The rhythm drew closer, faster, surrounding us like a drumbeat. Somewhere ahead, down the dark corridor, shadows moved. Figures. Dozens of them. Each one wearing a soldier's uniform. Each one with a smooth, faceless head. And all of them marching in perfect unison, straight for us. The corridor filled with the sound of synchronized boots, pounding like a war drum. My beam of light trembled as it swept across the advancing figures. Uniforms identical to ours. Webbing, rifles slung across their backs. But their faces were smooth, blank canvases of pale flesh. There were at least 20 of them. Maybe more. Shadows blending behind the first wave. "Hold your fire!" Harker barked, his pistol raised but steady. "We don't waste ammo unless we're sure it counts." "They're already dead," Collins snarled. His rifle quivered in his grip, finger tight on the trigger. The faceless soldiers didn't run. They marched, step after step, mechanical, deliberate. The sound reverberated in my skull until it seemed like my own heartbeat matched the rhythm. Then one broke rank, its head tilted, twitching, and from the smooth expanse of its face, a slit opened. Not a mouth, not eyes, just an opening, stretching wide as whispers poured out. "Closer, closer." That was enough. The corridor exploded with gunfire. My rifle kicked against my shoulder, muzzle flash painting the walls in strobe light chaos. Rounds tore into the faceless ranks, shredding uniforms, punching holes through torsos. Black ichor sprayed, sizzling where it struck the steel. But they didn't fall. Their bodies jerked under the impact, holes opening across their chests and limbs, but still they marched forward step after step. Their rifles remained untouched, hanging at their sides like forgotten props. One reached Collins. He screamed, driving his bayonet into its chest. The blade slid through like butter. For a second, it looked like he'd won. Then the thing leaned forward, wrapping its blank head against his, pressing flesh to flesh. Collins convulsed, dropping his rifle. His scream cut off, swallowed as though the faceless soldier were drinking it straight from his throat. When he fell, he was different. His eyes rolled back, skin already smoothing, features fading. "Jesus Christ!" someone yelled. "Fall back! Fall back!" We staggered down the corridor, firing blindly, trying to keep them at bay. Harker was last, unloading his pistol point blank into one that lunged too close. The thing crumpled, but its body twitched even as it hit the floor, crawling forward on broken limbs. We slammed through the doors of the command center, throwing every bolt and latch. The pounding of synchronized boots echoed outside, surrounding us. The faceless weren't trying to break in. Not yet. They were waiting. Inside, the room was tense, lit by flickering monitors hooked to the base's failing power grid. Maps of the facility glowed dim on the screens, red lines showing sealed sectors. Sublevel 3 pulsed like a warning wound. Harker's face was gray. "We can't hold this base. It's compromised." No one argued. The truth was carved into every one of us by what we'd just seen. "What are they?" I asked. My voice was raw, shaking. Harker didn't look at me. His gaze was locked on the map, jaw clenched. Finally, he muttered, "They're what happens when you try to weaponize something older than mankind." The words sank like ice, and before I could ask more, the lights flickered, and the whispering voices filled the command center from every speaker at once. The command center went cold as the speakers crackled to life. At first, it was just static, like ice grinding against ice. Then the whispers seeped through, layered and endless, filling every inch of the room. You belong. You belong. You belong. Private Marks clapped his hands over his ears. Make it stop. God damn it. Make it stop. Harker ripped the headset from one of the consoles and smashed it against the desk, but the voices didn't fade. They were coming from everywhere. The monitors flickered, lines of code replacing the maps. Symbols scrolled across the screens, circles within circles, jagged spirals, the same ones carved on the walls below. Holy hell, I breathed. It's in the system. Collins. No, not Collins. The memory stabbed through me like a knife. Collins was gone. Replaced. Sergeant Keller stepped forward, his face bathed in the sickly glow of the monitors. It's not just the system. It's using the system. We're not cut off from it. It's cut off from us. What the hell does that mean? Marks snapped. Keller jabbed a finger at the screen. It means the base is alive. The whole damn grid is wired into whatever's down there. It's pulling us in, digit by digit, thought by thought. Harker didn't flinch. Then we burn it. All of it. The room went silent. Burn the base? Out here in the middle of the Alaskan tundra, surrounded by ice and endless night? We'd be killing ourselves too. Still, none of us argued. The alternative was worse. Suddenly, the door shuddered under a heavy impact. Once, twice, the faceless were testing the locks. Each thud rattled my bones. Sir, I whispered, throat tight, we won't hold them for long. Harker's gaze hardened. Then we don't hold. We move. He turned to the consoles, yanking open a panel to reveal a nest of wires. His hands moved with grim purpose. If we overload the generator, it'll cook everything. Sigh. Stem, base, and whatever's inside it. And us, Keller said flatly. Harker's eyes flicked up. You think there's a chance of walking out alive otherwise? The pounding grew louder. From beyond the door came a chorus of whispers, perfectly synchronized with each impact. You belong. You belong. Marks broke, pacing the room, muttering to himself. No, 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 no. I can feel it. It's in my head already. His voice pitched higher. We're already dead. Before anyone could stop him, he raised his rifle. For a split second, I thought he was aiming at the door. Then he turned it on himself. The shot was deafening in the confined room. Marks dropped, his body twitching once before going still. The whispers didn't pause. If anything, they sounded satisfied. Harker didn't look away. His hands stayed buried in the wires, sparks flashing as he worked. We don't have much time. Either we finish this, or we join them. The door slammed again, harder. Cracks spidered through the steel. And then the lights went out. Only the whispers remained. Darkness pressed in like a living thing. My breath fogged in front of me, though the air was warm with panic. The only light came from rifle-mounted beams, slicing thin arcs through the black. Move, Harker whispered. His voice was steady, but I heard the strain beneath it. The generator's our only shot. We pried open a service hatch behind the command consoles and crawled into the maintenance shafts. The metal walls groaned with each movement, echoing our breaths. The shafts were narrow, barely wide enough for us to crawl, rifles clattering as we shuffled forward. Behind us, the pounding on the command center doors grew distant, but the whispers followed. Always the whispers. The shaft emptied into a stairwell, spiraling down into the guts of the base. Frost crept along the handrails, though my skin prickled with sweat. Each step echoed far too loud, bouncing off the concrete. At the bottom, we pushed through another door and entered the generator tunnels. They stretched long and low, pipes weaving across the ceiling, steam hissing from valves. Red emergency lights flickered, painting everything in a pulsing glow. The generator itself lay ahead, a hulking mass of steel and humming coils. Its thrum was uneven, stuttering as though already infected. Screens nearby flickered with static, lines of symbols racing across them in dizzying spirals. Keller whistled low. Looks like it's halfway gone already. We don't need it running, Harker said, crouching by a panel. We need it to blow. He handed me a toolkit. Cover me. So we did. Rifles up, light sweeping the shadows, while Harker and Keller ripped open the panel. Sparks showered the floor, the acrid stink of burning insulation filling the air. That's when we heard it. Not footsteps, not whispers, dragging. Something wet and heavy scraped against steel deeper in the tunnels. The sound grew louder, loser, accompanied by a steady drip, drip, drip that echoed off the pipes. We swung our lights. A figure emerged from the far end of the tunnel. At first I thought it was Dunbar, the soldier we'd lost earlier, but his body was wrong. Too long, limbs stretched thin, joints bending backward. His face sagged like melted wax, eyes gone, mouth hanging open. From his chest spilled strands of flesh that dragged along the floor, leaving a glistening trail. He wasn't alone. Shapes unfolded from the shadows behind him, crawling on all fours, their bodies twisted beyond recognition. Some still wore tatters of uniform, others had no clothes at all, their skin translucent, organs pulsing faintly inside. The whispers swelled, filling the tunnels like rushing water. Keller swore. "We're out of time." "Hold them off," Harker snapped, wrenching at the wires. "Buy me a minute." The creatures surged forward, dragging themselves with insect-like grace. We opened fire, bullets ripping through the dark. Each shot lit the tunnel in bursts of fire and blood, ichor splattering across the pipes. The air filled with screams, not just from their throats, but from the metal itself, vibrating as if the base shared their pain. One leapt, claws catching my vest, knocking me to the floor. Its flesh was cold, clammy, writhing like worms beneath skin. I jammed my rifle against its chest and fired. The recoil slammed me back, the creature bursting in a spray of black. But more were coming. Behind me, Harker shouted, "Almost there! Just hold!" The tunnel thundered with the sound of them, and I knew we wouldn't hold for long. The generator roared louder, its hum shifting into a teeth-grinding whine as Harker ripped cables from the panel. Sparks rained down, stinging my arms as I fired into the advancing swarm. "Almost there!" he shouted over the chaos. The tunnel was a slaughterhouse. The creatures crawled over one another, faceless and twisted, their bodies jerking like marionettes on broken strings. Bullets shredded them, ichor splattering across the steel walls, sizzling where it touched. But everyone we dropped, two more pressed forward. Keller swung the butt of his rifle into one skull, bone cracking wetly, then fired point blank into its chest. "We can't hold this line," he roared. The thing that used to be Dunbar lunged through the gunfire, dragging its length of pulsing tendrils. It moved differently than the others, slower, deliberate. Its empty face fixed on me, mouth sagging wider until flesh split. A voice poured from that maw, layered and familiar. "You are already part of us." My stomach flipped. I fired until the rifle clicked empty, the hammer falling on nothing. Keller yanked me back as Dunbar's tendrils lashed across the floor, carving gouges in steel. Harker cursed, jerking his hand back as electricity arced across the panel. "It's resisting me. It knows what I'm doing." The generator's lights flickered, symbols racing across the nearby screens like veins spreading through flesh. The base was fighting back. "Then force it!" Keller barked, slamming another mag into his rifle. I scrambled for a fresh clip, hands slick with ichor. One of the smaller creatures crawled up the wall, its limbs bending like insect legs. It dropped onto Keller's back, claws digging deep. He screamed, trying to shake it off. I jammed my bayonet through its throat. The blade sank into gelatinous flesh, black fluid spraying my face. Keller shoved it away, panting, blood soaking his vest. The generator whine spiked. Harker screamed, slamming a wrench into the control box. The sound that followed wasn't mechanical, it was alive. A shriek vibrating through the tunnels, rattling my skull. Then the lights turned red. "Overload initiated," Harker gasped. His hands trembled, bloodied from the wires. "We've got 5 minutes, maybe less." The ground shuddered beneath us, the walls contracting as though the base itself were breathing harder. Steam hissed from pipes overhead, scalding drops raining down. The creatures didn't stop. They poured toward us, unfazed by the tremor. One caught Keller's leg, dragging him down. He roared, firing wildly, but more swarmed over him, their hands pressed against his face, flesh melting into his skin. "Help him!" I shouted. But Harker grabbed me, eyes blazing. "No time. We move, or we all die." Keller's screams followed us as we stumbled toward the emergency hatch at the far end of the tunnel. I didn't look back, but I heard the wet sound of his body splitting, his voice merging into the whispers that filled every inch of air. We slammed the hatch open and crawled into the freezing night. Snow blinded me, wind howling across the tundra. Behind us, the base shook, the hum of the generator rising to a murderous pitch. But the whispers didn't fade. They followed us into the storm. The storm tore at us the second we cleared the hatch. Wind screamed like 1,000 voices, snow slicing our faces raw. The tundra stretched out, endless white under a starless sky. Behind us, the base shook as though it were alive, red light pulsing from vents and cracks like veins beneath skin. "We don't have long," Harker shouted over the wind, his words ripped apart by the gale. "When that generator goes, this whole place is coming down." The ground trembled, a deep vibration that rattled my bones. Steam plumed from fissures in the ice, carrying with it that same sweet, rotting stench. The base wasn't dying quietly. It was birthing something. Shapes moved in the snow behind us. At first I thought they were shadows, tricks of the storm. Then they stood tall against the wind, faceless soldiers, dozens of them, marching out of the hatch we'd escaped. Their eyes, or the lack of them, locked onto us. "They're still coming," I yelled. Harker raised his rifle, firing short, controlled bursts. Figures dropped but got back up, jerking forward through the snow, ichor freezing black across their chests. They didn't feel the cold. They didn't feel anything. The tundra shook harder. A deep groan rose from beneath the ice, so low I felt it in my teeth. My light swept across the horizon, and I saw movement. Not soldiers, something bigger. The ground ahead of us cracked, ice splitting in jagged lines. From the fissures rose tendrils thicker than trees, glistening pale in the storm. They whipped skyward, writhing like serpents, blotting out the faint shimmer of aurora above. "Oh my God," I whispered. It wasn't just in the base anymore. The thing had grown beyond it, spreading through the earth itself. What we'd seen below was only a fragment, a seed. Harker grabbed my arm. His face was gray, eyes bloodshot, but his grip was iron. "We get to the ridge, if we're far enough, Ma." Just maybe, we survived the blast. We stumbled through the snow, boots sinking deep, lungs burning in the icy wind. Behind us, the faceless marched, unhurried, relentless, their whispering voices carried by the storm. "You can't run. You belong." The ridge loomed ahead, jagged black rock rising from the white wasteland. Salvation, or at least distance. But the ground convulsed beneath our feet, nearly throwing me down. The base shrieked, a sound so loud, so vast, it seemed to come from the sky itself. The red glow from its vents blazed brighter, pulsing in frantic rhythm. "Now!" Harker bellowed. "It's going!" We threw ourselves against the rocks, clawing upward as the world behind us convulsed. I turned just once, heart hammering. The base erupted in light. It wasn't fire, not at first. It was pure, blinding white, shooting skyward like a second sun. Tendrils silhouetted against it writhed and disintegrated, snow vaporizing in a wave of steam. The faceless soldiers froze mid-step, their bodies unraveling into ash. Then came the blast. The shockwave tore across the tundra, lifting me from the ground, slamming me into the rocks. My ears rang, vision spinning as snow and ice blasted skyward. And still, beneath it all, I swore I heard the whispers. "You belong." Silence. For a moment I thought I'd gone deaf. My ears screamed with a high-pitched whine, but the world itself was still. No wind, no whispers, just silence. I pushed myself up from the snow, body aching, lungs burning as the cold air cut through me. The ridge behind me was scorched black, ice vaporized into jagged glass. The tundra below had changed. Where the base once stood was now a crater, smoldering, glowing faintly as if embers still burned beneath the ice. Harker was there, half buried in drifted snow. I stumbled to him, shaking his shoulder. He groaned, rolling over, his face pale but alive. "You still breathing?" I croaked. "Barely." He spat blood, wiped his mouth with a trembling hand. "Did it work?" We both turned toward the crater. The storm had stilled, the sky opening above us. For the first time in weeks, the stars were visible, sharp, cold pinpricks of light across the black. Aurora flickered faintly at the horizon, green and ghostly. For a heartbeat, I dared to hope. Then the ice cracked. A sound like thunder rolled across the tundra. The crater shifted, walls collapsing inward. From deep below came a low, resonant moan, something vast and wounded, but not dead. Steam poured upward in great columns, carrying with it the faintest trace of whispers. "We are not gone." We are inside you. Harker's face hardened. He pushed himself upright, swaying but determined. We bought time. That's all. I wanted to argue. I wanted to believe we'd finished it. But as I looked across the wasteland, I saw movement beneath the ice. Shadows shifting, slow but certain. The blast hadn't killed it. It had only forced it deeper. The silence stretched, broken only by our ragged breaths. Then Harker turned to me, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. No one can ever know, not Washington, not anyone. If they think there's something down here, they'll come looking. I finished. My voice was hollow. And they'll wake it all over again. He nodded. His gaze drifted back to the crater. So we bury it, we freeze it, we make sure no one ever steps foot here again. I stared at the stars. They seemed colder now, watching without care. Somewhere inside me, the whispers stirred, faint but present, like an ember in the back of my skull. I pressed my palms against my temples, willing them away. You belong. I didn't tell Harker. What good would it do? If he knew the truth, that it was already inside me, he'd put a bullet in my head without hesitation. And maybe that would be mercy. Instead, I forced a weak smile. Let's get out of here, sir. We stumbled down the ridge, two broken men in a dead world. The tundra stretched infinite before us, unforgiving and silent. Behind, the crater steamed, glowing faintly as though something beneath it still breathed. Maybe we'd stopped it, maybe we hadn't. But one truth clung to me as the whispers settled in my bones. You don't destroy something that old, you just survive it.